Radio, in addition to also being indirectly crowdsourced politics and logical checkmate stream. I will be moderating a debate or conversation between the two of them. It is my intent going forward to try to offer my services for this purpose. I've discussed with these gentlemen before bringing them on what kind of debate we're going to have. It is not, as of right now, my intent to enforce rigid time limits on how long they are allowed to talk, but I do have that option available to me. If for some reason it got out of hand, I don't think it will. These two are both usually very level-headed and very good at debating things concisely. One of the things that I recognize that goes on right now in debates online is that they're usually a mess. They're basically the Jerry Springer of internet arguments and debate. And for me, I don't like that format, mostly because of the fact that the I guess you could call it the mudslinging becomes more important than the content. And if something is important as Ukraine is being discussed, then I would prefer that it was being discussed in a way that was intellectually sound. So, um, also, as you guys can probably imagine, I do not necessarily agree or disagree with what either of these gentlemen are saying on this topic. And feel free, once again, to tune in to my stuff. If you guys have anybody who wants to debate and wants a fair moderator, I'm not going to be giving any views of my own on this. If I do make any kind of interventions as far as to what is being said between the two of them, there are times during debates when I think somebody may believe that their opponent is saying something that they are not. So rather than sit and listen to somebody respond for a great deal of time, on something that isn't even what the other guy believes, occasionally I may try to mediate in the perspective of like being a diplomat between the two sides, not to value one side over another. So with that said, I'm going to bring on one of these guys at a time. I do advise that you check out their channels. Even though obviously I don't agree or disagree with everything either of them say, links to their channels have been provided in the description of this video. And we're going to start with Crowdsourced Politics, also known as Cypher.
Hey everybody, my name is Cypher. I have a channel called Crowdsourced Politics. The goal of Crowdsourced Politics was to bring in a bunch of different people from across the political spectrum and host a podcast together. That project is still ongoing. The people that I brought up together to do said project are no longer working with it. So we're kind of doing this like crowdsourcing things from audience members, our Facebook group, Twitter, Discord, etc. So that's what you can expect to see on my channel. I do a once a week live stream of the weekly news on Thursdays, or most Thursdays anyways, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. What you could expect on that show is similar to anything that you can get on NPR or any of the actual other news channels, with a bit of my own personal opinion smattered throughout the discussions of whatever we cover. We also do another podcast called Cypher State, which is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast that I did with Tiberius D. And we're going to be launching that back up starting next month. So yeah, glad to be here. Thanks Review Radio for hosting.
No problem. All right. So this is Paul, also known as Logical Checkmate. Go ahead and give your intro.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm coming to you live from the gem of Central Europe, Czech Republic, where I'm currently at a holiday. So I apologize for rather rudimentary conditions, no green screen, etc., no high-end microphone. That said, Paul. My channel is mostly focused on, trying to find out the truth of things where most people believe otherwise. Simply put, vast majority of people believe something to be true. I disagree, and I prove that, or at least try to have pretty good track record so far. So, yeah.
Okay, so before the broadcast began, I guess first of all, we want to evaluate, make sure that we are clear between the two of you. What specifically are we debating today? Probably should have done that before we got on. I just forgot to ask, because I think I know what we know, but I want to be sure that the two of you are aware of what the topic is. So go ahead and have an exchange then. Paul, what is it that made you want to have this debate with Cypher? And Cypher, do you agree to, that's what you're going to be discussing today?
Sounds fair to me. Go ahead.
I believe it was on Twitter, since it is quite a while back. You had exchange with Cypher. I got tagged there, and Cypher said something to the extent that he doesn't see the hand of the U.S. government in Ukraine and stuff like that. How?
Oh, I didn't say all that.
Okay, then I do apologize.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
As I said, quite a while, and I was like, basically, no, you don't understand, you don't get it, and it's impossible to explain something so complex via Twitter. Because for
Twitter
those of you,
and
for those of you who don't know, I'm over a year now working on a documentary called "Those Responsible for Ukraine War," and I need to sum up this much things, squeeze it all in, while it being also people be engaged and be able to follow. And I hope I will at least somewhat do that here with you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. It's to the audience. Yeah, we might have been disagreeing about who was ultimately responsible, but that isn't to say that the United States has no culpability whatsoever within the Ukraine. The issue is that who is primarily responsible. And to me, the primary responsible party here is Russia, because Russia decided to invade. So that is where the moral calculus enters primarily for me. And I'm sure we can talk about everything from whether or not the United States gave Russia a agreement on not expanding NATO, all the way to who actually violated Minsk 1 and 2. Might be mispronouncing that, but the agreements for ceasefire brokered by the European Union between Russia and Ukraine. And their respective parties.
So in the ineffectual coin toss that we did before, I basically you won, Cypher. So you were free to go first. If you feel that you have you're ready to go ahead and give your initial point on Russia being involved in Ukraine and them being the chief movers.
Sure. So I'll condense this as short as possible as we can. Roughly, there was 2 color revolutions in Ukraine, which is what Russia likes to say is the United States' fault. That was the Orange Revolution, and then there was it the I'm sorry, I'm getting things confused. Multiple color revolutions throughout all of Eastern Europe, former USSR bloc countries, and Russia likes to blame the United States for all of these. Whether or not the United States is, pro-democracy and fomenting it, I don't really care. I'm pro-democracy. The United States has a position that is pro-democratic and is giving money to groups that are pro-democratic within these countries, and those lead to formative change where democracy is upheld. I'm okay with that. Now, that said, when we get to Ukraine, we have an issue with the Maidan Revolution and who was in charge of that. Everybody wants to talk about the Nuland tapes and whether or not that is actually Nuland saying, yes, the United States is directly involved. Fuck the EU. It's the common refrain from that conversation that was only a clip of what was being said. Wonder why that was. And then also whether or not the United States is directly involved in fomenting that one or not. I do not believe that the United States was directly involved. The Organization for the Democracy. It's I'm going to get names wrong. I apologize. I know what I'm talking about. I'm just bad with names. So the the Organization for Democracy group did have some chapters within Ukraine, and those chapters did help with said revolution. Now, does that mean the United States is directly responsible for said revolution? Does that mean the United States is controlling said revolution? Does it mean the United States picked who is in charge of Ukraine? I will say no, because the United States not only did the United States not get everything that they wanted, they barely got anything that they wanted. Yes, the Ukrainians needed a big brother in order to protect them from the aggression that Russia has clearly been putting against Ukraine. But that isn't the same as the United States picking everything and going along with it and putting it into a puppet government. That is my basic premise on this.
All right, Paul. So I go ahead and respond.
I will have troubles because I think you fundamentally misunderstand as to what is the goal of U.S. government in this whole mess. If I might politely disagree with you. As far as I see it, and you can follow the evidence and stuff like that I've uncovered in the meantime, it is basically to force the EU to move away from Russia towards American energy markets, away from the Russian energy markets towards the American energy markets. I don't know if you've seen my my video that I did on that, Cypher, because that
I have not watched your videos. I like going into
Right.
these things blind without looking at people, so I don't
Okay.
get biased before we get involved.
Absolutely understand. Would probably do the same. Are you familiar with Nord Stream 2 and the whole mess around?
I'm familiar that there isn't anybody that actually knows what happened.
Right. No, I don't mean the kaboom. I mean
okay.
rather what was happening. Like the years
Nord
before.
Stream 2, Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2, I'll just summarize it, two pipelines that deliver natural gas from Russia to the
Precisely.
EU. And there was another pipeline that was supposed to go through Turkey that the United States was trying to help with. I want to say it was Iraq. To get oil and natural gas also to the European Union. Nord Stream 2, the Germans basically signed off on Russia because Russia gave them a better deal. The United States wasn't very keen on that, but didn't, in my opinion, push too much back on that due to the timing that it was hovering under. At least initially, when Ukraine popped off, things got a little different.
Right. Okay. So I'll sum up my point as this. The goal of the and please, I know I will say things that are being used by Russian propaganda. Absolutely, I would just ask audience to understand that propaganda is not necessarily lying; it is telling what serves, and sometimes truth simply serves. Russians also say truth; they lie a lot, all the fucking time. Don't get me wrong, but they also say truth when it serves. Yeah. So if I may, the entire point of all this mess is to get EU abandoned Russia as their supplier of energies, and they were going about it that way that they've been crossing over Russian red lines. We can argue if they are reasonable or unreasonable, but they were quite well established for literally centuries of precedent, and they were crossing those red lines specifically with the intention of getting this war. If I could sum it up morally and stuff, I'm not saying, by the way, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. I'm saying this stupid ass war that is right on my doorstep could have been avoided. And I will sum it up somewhat via high school drama. Imagine if United States is the captain of the football team, EU is the cheerleader, bloody Russia is a bully, and Ukraine is the nerd. And if you would if the captain of the football team would basically fake a porn video between the nerd and the bully's sister, and then show it to the bully would cut off the legs of the nerd, which is terrible. It is evil, but start to see who's responsible. Is it the captain of the football team? Is it the bully? Are they both? Are they both assholes? Etc. 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 So I don't know, like if that makes sense. I'm sorry, I'm not the best, like in live debates. Yeah, but I hope you get me at least my point. We obviously get to proving it, etc. later on.
Sure. No, I understand your point. I just I will clearly disagree with it, but that's what
Sure
this
thing.
discussion is about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So go ahead and reply.
Yeah, okay, we'll just do this as a discussion. Just cut me off, please, because I can ramble. So what essentially to me is happening here? Let's change this this analogy a little bit and keep it in the same vein so we understand.
Sure.
The United States is a bully. We can say that it is. We know that it is. The United States has certain interest. I don't know. Maybe the goth sister. They want to get with the goth sister for whatever reason. Okay. Right. And so it's going to do things to help that happen. Right. Whether it's go smash someone's face in because they were moving in on territory, or hit flirting with their sister. We'll see Iraq with Iran, or whatever else might be. However, that doesn't mean that every instance of where this bully is involved in is actually the bully's fault. So in this instance, what we have here is that there was a, we'll say the nerd, which is Ukraine, was flirting with both the EU and Russia. And during those flirts, the nerd had two friends, and its two friends were the people that make up Ukraine. You have people in the Western Ukraine that wanted to be closer to the EU, and you have people in Eastern Ukraine that wanted to be closer with Russia for numerous different reasons. One of the friends is actually a Russian, and they're related to the goth kid that tries to like smash face and like wants to do things right. And the other one, well, they're really friendly with like the cheerleaders, and they're like, oh, you know what, the cheerleader was nice to me one day, and so I want to be closer to those cheerleaders because they were really good people. All right, that's what happens. The high school bully, the United States, also would like Ukraine to be friends with the cheerleader because then he can get free math answers. Okay, he can get free math answers because if they're friends, then you can be like, hey man, I need help on my homework, and the guy's like, oh okay, I can help you on your homework. Oh look, we're all friends, right? And then what happened is that the Russians, the goth kid that's also a bully, decided that I'm going to make a better offer to one of the friends because that friend is closer to me. And that offer in this instance was a slightly better deal on natural gas imports from Russia. It was a really good deal. It was like, I think there was the saving of Ukraine of like several millions of dollars a year. Not just
Upwards.
upwards. Yeah. It might have been higher. Again, the particulars to me don't matter as much as the gist of it. So if I'm wrong on this and it was like $100 million, $1 billion, doesn't matter. Millions of dollars were saved a year. And so, you know what? The guy's like, I'm going to go back with Russia. But that pissed off the other friends in Western Ukraine because those friends are super close with the cheerleaders and the EU. And they're a little bit culturally different than the other friend in Eastern Ukraine because Eastern Ukraine is closer with them. They're ethnic Russians, yada, yada, yada. I think I'm beating this fucking analogy to death, so I'm going to stop using it. So Eastern Ukraine wanted to be closer to Russia. Eastern Ukraine has a lot of ethnic Russians in it. During the USSR, Russia ceded its border countries with ethnic Russians, forced movement of people into these countries, giving favorable land deals or not land deals because it was nominally socialist, but, giving Politburo people, palaces or whatever have you to move to this area and run it. You, governor, go over this area, bring your whole family. You can even bring your 10th cousin. We don't care. Go over to this area, run this place for us, make sure that it is close to Russia. And that is essentially what happened in Eastern Ukraine. Not only does that what happened in Eastern Ukraine, but before before and after the Color Revolution, Russia was giving Eastern Ukrainians a reason to fear the rest of Ukraine. The Eastern Ukrainian Russians, ethnic Russians, to fear the rest of Ukraine by seeding them with propaganda, lies, and all this other stuff about they want to kill the ethnic Russians, they want to destroy your language, they want to do all this stuff. Fast forward to the Maidan Revolution, and right before and directly just after of Russia taking Crimea, which pretty much the entire world's like, fine, take it, we understand, right? Fine, take it, whatever, we understand, okay? And then during that time, prior to the exact kickoff of where Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine started a civil war, they started talking about how Western Ukraine is full of Nazis. Not just has a Nazi problem, because every country has a fascist problem. The United States has a fascist problem. France has a fascist problem. Italy has a fascist problem. Norway has a fascist problem. Every single country has roughly about 10% of the population that is just authoritarian, right-wing pieces of shit. Okay? Ukraine is no different. Ukraine has a nationalist problem. Of course it has a nationalist problem. It fought the Polish. It fought the Russians. It fought the fucking Germans. Of course it does. It fought for its entire survival existence as a people throughout the entire time of its existence. At one point, Russia is like, you're not actually a distinct people. You are a dialect of Russian, and you should be worshiping us over here in the Kremlin, or St. Petersburg. You should be worshiping us and take all our orders from us. and they said, fuck you. And that is exactly what's going on here.
Right.
Now I've rambled enough. So
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead,
Go ahead,
Logic. I
Paul.
rambled enough. I think I made my
Okay.
point here. So
Right. So here are two ways, like how we can tackle this. Like first of all, we can go specifically over the inner Ukrainian conflict, i.e., also Ukrainian-Russian conflict, like how it originated, like this one specifically. Because that is what you have just went over. But that is, in my opinion, incomplete. It stretches all the way to 90s. But then I would be basically needing to explain so much. Like it is immense that I think it would be better that I would list the grievances that Russia has that I consider legitimate. You would probably not believe a vast majority of them, and you would ask me to prove it, which we can do later. But since you have went into the inter-Ukrainian thing, I think I can tackle it. Now you have mentioned that Putin, through propaganda, convinced Ukrainians in the East, the Russian-speaking Ukrainians, that there are fascists and they are out to get them, basically, to kill them and stuff like that.
yeah, I would say that's yes. I would say that's a
okay.
fair assessment. Go ahead. I'll stop talking.
After Maidan, people from Svoboda Party, I believe you are familiar, got into power. I believe because they've got a lot of funding from the U.S., which is so nice. Like that the United States of America funds literal neo-Nazis. And Neil here knows what is my position on just calling people a Nazi. It's quite serious for me.
Yeah, it
and
is.
Just so you understand, Mr. Tachinbok and others, they literally, I'm not over exaggerating. I'm literally saying that they wanted, that guy literally said that he wants to kill every Jew and every Russian in Ukraine. And one more thing that he wanted to do was specifically put on passport of Jewish people a stamp so they can be recognized when they return from abroad to Ukraine.
Can I say one thing?
Sure thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I am not denying the fact that there are Nazis in Ukraine. I just clear for the audience.
Sure, absolutely.
So there are, and I just wanted to make sure that that's clear.
Right.
I see some chats from the
not
audience.
in the slightest. Not in the slightest what I was suggesting. Yeah, I'm saying, I'm taking it further. They got into power. They got into government positions. I believe one of their guys was second in command in government. How's it translated? Second prime minister or deputy prime minister?
Yeah,
or some
it's
shit
like undersecretary of state kind of thing for the US.
Yeah, and they had also various other government positions. So they were quite powerful. Now,
yeah, it was like 10 to 12% of parliament just after the revolution were avowed nationalists of various stripes. Some of them were Nazis.
Right. And that is not all. The first thing that parliament passed against the constitution, this was forbidden by Ukrainian constitution, that was passed that they are going to forbid Russian language in official use and other languages as well. That was Polish, that was Hungarian, etc., Romanian. By the way, if you're asking about the source, this is directly from the EU from the time, because they were saying, hey, what the fuck? These are not European values. What are you doing? Now, this law was vetoed by the president at the time, so it never went into power. But just take that message. You have just overthrown a government. You are not saying, hey, we want to work with you, etc. There are Nazis in power who say, we want to kill Russians, we want to kill Jews. You know what I mean? And the first thing they do is against constitution. They vote and they pass a vote to ban Russian language after overthrowing a president that was voted overwhelmingly by the Eastern Ukrainians.
Yep.
You cannot say that it's not a valid reason to be like, hey, holy shit. Now, if I may, the for example, what happened in Crimea, that was full on, Putin came in, he took it, etc., right?
Mhm.
But what happened in eastern Ukraine, those were originally protests, and those were valid protests, absolutely. And what happened was that Putin put in also his soldiers that went on holiday, and they started to push for independence. But because of actions of these idiots in Kiev, of these neo-Nazis, they found a fertile ground where people were like, you know what? They have a point.
So I am not going to disagree that Eastern Ukraine didn't have a reason to be fearful. They did. My counter to that would be every year since the Maidan Revolution and the initial government therein, the Nazis that have been in power have actually lost power substantially, up until the point that Russia decided to do an official invasion. What is it, 2 years now? So that would be my counterpoint to that. My other counterpoint to that would be that Russia did not give Russia any moral justifications to get involved in a budding civil war and turn it into a hot civil war. As soon as they put troops on the ground, the little green men that everybody wants to talk about, and also the fact that they fomented, they did it the same way kind of the United States would do something, right, back in the 70s or whatever. They sent in military advisors, they sent in equipment, then they sent in paramilitary units, so they sent in mercenaries and people, like you said, on holiday. And then they ended up not only doing that, but taking over the units within Eastern Ukraine and being the leaders of those units to push the fighting in.
Right.
So that would be my counter to this. That's why I think Russia's in the wrong ultimately on these things. One of the reasons, but we can continue to talk about it, of course.
Sure thing. So, but first of all, I need to point out one thing. I'm not talking here necessarily as to who's right, who's wrong. I'm saying that given all the things, or let me backtrack.
Then I'll get off that point. I'll get off that point, and we can move to the point where I think that Russia is primarily responsible for this, even though the U.S. might have some culpability.
Sure. So
real quick, guys, just a moderator point, because like I know, for example, that Paul made a lot of points in the beginning, and then Cypher said that he disagreed. And me, as somebody listening to this, the only thing I want to do, and this isn't about, because you guys are being polite, that part is great, no problem. What I want to be sure for the sake of the audience is that give each other, like, because like if you guys talk for as long as you are, like you're both making valid points that are going to get lost. Like, you know, Paul's not going to get a chance to answer each one, and you're not going to get a chance to answer. So so at this point, just try to make it one point at a time as much as possible. You know, and again, I think, you know, you guys are also doing pretty good at being polite about interrupting each other if somebody's saying that someone has a position that they don't, and which I think is positive, as long as we can do it and be civil about it. So, my apologies. Please continue.
No, just one thing real quick. I'm open for you moderating this a bit more, because I'm long-winded. And so if you want to like direct conversations via radio, be like, hey, I heard Cypher say this, heard Logic say this. I'm perfectly okay with that. That's why I wanted a moderator.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. That's just, I'm kind of feeling out how you guys are doing this, and so far it's been good. This is great. So by all means, I just want to be sure that you both have an opportunity to answer each other's points and that nothing gets lost. So because there's a lot of nuance in this. So okay. So go ahead and continue where you were at. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a timer on of my own. And, you know, if it starts to get too long-winded on one side or the other, then I'll start prodding. But I don't want to interrupt you guys. I want to be sure you're clear. Okay?
Right.
Go ahead.
So my point entire is that regardless who's good, who's bad, etc., morality flies out of the window, because superpowers do not operate on morality, on international law, etc. Is that what Russia is doing? Every single superpower throughout history would do the same, because they have lost all the incentives why to keep peace and remained only with the incentives why to go to war. And we are not told this in the West. That's actually quite a good summary of mine. I can go into the details later on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't quite catch you. You said not told what exactly in the West.
In the West, we are basically told that what Russia is doing is nothing more than Putin trying to reconstruct USSR. That's not true.
Oh, okay. Do you think there's any validity to that, though?
There are definitely. So we need to understand one thing. What we do when we are looking at the other countries like Russia, like China, we look only at their leaders and we forget they have their own internal politics. Putin
Sure.
needs to keep certain people happy. One of those people are nationalists.
Mhm.
And basically what the West was doing was giving more ammunition and more ammunition to the nationalists, where could they make a big, stronger and stronger point, hey, we need to invade Ukraine, and if we don't, we'll just do it without you, Vladi. You know what I mean? So I'm here what I
Wait,
mean?
real
I'm here
quick,
speculating and stuff like
Cypher,
that.
is there something you don't get that he just said?
No, I'm mulling it over. I'll interrupt if I need
Okay,
to.
go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. So if I may list all the what I consider legitimate grievances that I found out through my research, and you will probably not believe vast majority of them, despite quite a lot about there are literally movies made about those things, but it is always with a spin. Yeah. So I need to take it all the way back to 90s. Like in 96, there was first presidential election in Russian history. That was the Yeltsin
Right.
re-election.
Yeah.
No,
Clinton was directly involved in that.
no
Right. That's
over
what you're getting at.
exaggerate. Not only involved, they full on stole it.
Yeah.
The election
Well,
was no, bro.
no, I mean, I know. I just don't know if I would say full on stole it. There was a definitely, okay, I'll help you out if you help me out next kind of thing. And I don't know if I would categorize that as necessarily a full on steal. But then again, I do not know the full. I'm not comfortable saying I know 100% of what happened to say
Well, then
that.
let's give Paul an opportunity
Yeah.
then. So,
Right.
Paul,
Yeah.
what if you're saying something as definitive as it was full on stolen? Can you give us an example of what you mean?
Absolutely. So President Yeltsin was 95, 96 polling,
Mhm.
less low as 3%. For those of you who don't know, again, this is not something known by many people in the West, is that Russia in the 90s was complete mess. It was completely destroyed, and people blamed Yeltsin for it. Rightfully so. He was a drunk, etc. Yeah, and people. So he was polling as low as 3%. US comes in and sends there a team of experts that manipulate the media. They literally put people. There was an assassination of, for example, a head of certain TV station, and the experts, by their own admission, were like, "Hey, Yeltsin, would you like to put some friendly guy in that would talk nicely about you?" That is by their own admission. That is, again, it's literally in the TV, in the movie, and it's also in the Time magazine. I don't know if you've seen it, "Yanks to the Rescue," if you read it, from Time magazine from '96.
Maybe I'd have to double check because again, I'm terrible with names. It's one ear and out the other when it comes to
Right.
names. I remember the gist of things and the overall
Sure.
narratives of things, but names are just not my thing for some reason.
Look, I don't ask ever to people trust me. If you have, hey, I want to see source for this, I will look out for it, quickly, and can give it to you. Yeah. So there was the media was completely was dominated by Yeltsin as this team's advisement, etc. This team was directly in contact with CIA and with President Clinton presidential campaign. President Yeltsin directly asked from Clinton for funds for his campaign and to pay off state workers, because Russia was such a mess. The state workers were going at the time more than half a year without a pay. He asked directly, "Yeah, okay, we get it through." IMF funneled it in. This money went directly to the state workers, which made them happy directly in front of an election. And it also went to President Yeltsin campaign. President Yeltsin campaign is estimated to have been as high as $1 billion. The allowed legal limit by Russian constitution at the time was 3 to 13 million at the time. I have those two numbers in my head. Would have to double check, yeah. But
Three
clearly
to 15 million. Just for a point of clarity, make sure I heard you correctly. You said there was a limit to how much political campaign.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I heard you correctly.
Yeah, and President Yeltsin had up to 1 billion. One source that I don't want to use in my in my documentary because I couldn't verify it, and they didn't respond to me. Maybe they would respond to Neil. It was a magazine based in Moscow, founded by American expats that were pushed out under Putin out of Russia, and they've been in US. And they have had interview with Michael Mitcroft. He was a head of OSCE of monitoring the '96 election, and he full on said, "Dude, it was stolen." Like in fucking Chechnya, there was 100% people voted for Yeltsin. 100% people. That was after Russian-Chechen war. That was completely brutal and destroyed whole of Chechnya. Another thing that he said that there were also more votes than actually registered voters, etc. And he reported it to EU, to the US, and they told him, "Shut the fuck up about it."
He's looking for a conversational interrupt. Go ahead, Cypher.
Yeah. So what I would say is that to me, when someone says a stolen election, and I just want this point to be clear so that all the audience understands me, I don't consider an election to be actually stolen unless there is vote stuffing, assassination of leaders, corralling and forcing people to vote, that sort of thing. That's where it becomes stolen. Manipulation is a different story. This would be, to me, a manipulated thing. It's the manufacturing of consent. It's the putting a thumb on a scale, but not outright stealing it. And I know this might seem a quibble to people that like, well, it's still a stolen election, but I think these things matter because they require different ways to go and either prevent it or stop it, fix it, etc. Because in this regard, then we could,
because it sounds to me like what you're saying, Paul, is there were more votes than registered voters. Would that be an example of a stolen election to you, Cypher?
Yeah, that would be a problem. I must have not heard that bit. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's what I'm trying to do, is facilitate conversation. Okay, so Paul, just because I totally get all of the political background, but that's why it was necessary, and I'm glad that he asked that question because I was going to ask the same one, which was just that to define what that means. So, for example, Hillary Clinton arguably was given undue influence by the Democratic Party, blah, 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 blah. But nobody suggested that somebody was, say, rigging machines against Bernie Sanders, at least not at the time. You see what I'm saying? Like, you have to differentiate what kind of influence the election you mean. Now, when it comes to the more registered voters than votes or whatever, then there's a problem. So go ahead and define exactly what you mean by stolen, unless, do you have something else you want to clarify, Cypher?
Yeah, just on the more registered voters, that is reason to investigate it further, but not necessarily direct evidence of there being a rigging. And the reason I say that, or stealing, is because every country, in my opinion, not every country, a lot of countries, in my opinion, don't do voter registration correctly. To me, voter registration should be done automatically. It should be based on where your employment is, where your employer is, where your last known address is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there isn't any way for these things to happen. The United States has a huge issue with this, where people are like, well, there's like 10,000 dead people on this rolls in this town that's only 2,000 people. Yeah, they never cleared the rolls. They don't do any automatic things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you don't know if those 10,000 people actually voted. You just know that they're there. Prove that they voted, and if they voted, then yes, you have a stolen election in that sense. But if they didn't vote, then who gives a shit?
So I think we have a better version now of clarity. So Paul, given that criteria, lay out specifically what you mean when you state that the election was outright stolen.
If you consider the situation in Russia at the time, and there was only one TV channel for quite a lot of Russians, and there is head of the TV who was very critical to Boris Yeltsin, assassinated, and then there is someone who is very friendly to Boris Yeltsin put in place. That maybe not be by Cypher's definition literally stolen. It was like adding weight onto a scale, but we are talking not putting a finger on a scale, but dropping there a sandbag.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment. I mean, tipping the scale is just one way to talk about it. I'm not talking about scale. I'm not talking about scale, I guess. Sure. You know what I mean. You're not trying to.
And specifically, they have been running things that if the Yeltsin's opponent would win, there would be a civil war, unfounded, etc., etc., etc. Now, if I may just clarify this, why you don't hear from Putin about this, You've never heard of Putin about this. It's because Yeltsin put Putin in power.
Yeah.
He was his successor, and Putin is using the same fucking methods that they have learned from Americans to manipulate, seal, etc. You know what I mean? The election to this day.
I don't mean equivalentness, but the USSR had great propaganda, so I don't necessarily know if it's a learning experience necessarily.
Watch out. You fully and absolutely misunderstand how, and this is simply because you lads are from states. The difference between Russian propaganda and American propaganda. Russian propaganda is over the top and stuff like that. Vast majority of Russians didn't believe the propaganda. Like, goddamn it, we didn't believe in the propaganda here in Czechoslovakia back in the day. American propaganda is incredibly subtle, and that's why it's so effective.
Well, let's I do have to say this, Cypher. We should give him a little credit because he's from a former Soviet bloc country.
Sure. And the reason I said that Russian propaganda was moderately successful was because of its influence on the United States. Not in 2016. I'm talking all the way back to the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, where they were actually integrating themselves into pro-liberation movements within the United States. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't actual reasons to have pro-liberation movements in the United States, but to say that Russia wasn't involved in them at all is to, in my opinion, to be disingenuous. Not that anybody here is saying that. Just want to make that clear.
Sure. So I guess I do need to ask, because the audience is asking justifiably, what does this specifically have to do, Paul, with the war in Ukraine? Can you get to that?
Stolen elections. There was also support for Chechen fighters during the Chechen wars.
Mm-hmm.
And in Russia, the nationalists, plus the NATO expansion, all of that, the nationalists basically were, holy shit, they are out to get us. If you put, and you need to remember who was put in charge of Russia. That was Yeltsin. And what happened during his leadership was a complete and absolute destruction of Russia. If you Google the biggest theft of property in history, that will be what basically Russia in the 90s. The life expectancy plummeted. There have been up to 4 million people, extra mortality, that died in Russia during 1990s, as compared with the pre-collapse Soviet Union collapse, numbers. 4 million
100%.
people extra died. It was immense suffering, and people know that it was because of Yeltsin. And who did the West put in charge? Yeltsin. If you put that together with specifically with the Chechen fighters, etc., they are literally saying, holy shit, they are out to get us. Now, with Ukraine specifically, again, everything is complex. Russia does not perceive, and rightfully so, NATO as purely defensive alliance. Why I'm saying rightfully so, because NATO was used 3 times already. That was 2 times in Yugoslavia, 1 time in Libya. Neither of those times anyone was being attacked from the defensive alliance. Sorry, I have technical difficulties here. Yeah, all good. What NATO was basically justifying their actions was that they were protecting human rights.
Yeah.
And what do they say about Russia? That they are a champion of human rights? No, that they fucking stamp on the human rights, constantly. Now with Libya specifically.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you restate that statement? Are you saying that the United States says that Russia is constantly stamping on the human rights? I just want to make sure I'm understanding your part correctly.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So that statement. Just to double be clear, that statement was the United States directing that at Russia, and then Russia interpreting that as you're next.
Yes, and
okay.
Again, you need to look at it, from the perspective of superpowers, not from your personal. They don't plan,
I know.
5 years ahead. They plan 100 years ahead. You know what I mean? They just can't, afford it. Now, another reason is,
The reason I went like that, just to be clear, is because the United States' political system doesn't really lend itself to planning this far ahead.
That's
China does. The Russia kind of does, at least as long as there's a continuity of it. But you know, there was a foreign policy consensus kind of in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't exist anymore in the US. There isn't that foreign policy consensus. Iraq completely destroyed that.
Right.
As far as foreign policy, in my opinion.
Okay. Neil, or if you could Google Russia's Achilles heel in the meantime, and what will pop out for you, what we'll find out. The reason why Russia went to war with Georgia and then with Ukraine in 2014, and again now, is because they are afraid that it's crossing their red line if NATO expands there. They want to keep NATO as far as possible because they are pushing on absolutely critical area, and that is Caucasus Mountain, you know what I mean, and their access to the Black Sea. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with how Syrian war started.
I'm sorry, I didn't. What, the Syrian war, is that what you said?
War, yes.
Yeah. Do I know how it started?
Yes.
I have an idea, but I'm sure you'll try to correct me on it. So let me state what I believe to be true. Not Hormuz, that's the Strait. Homs. There it is. Homs. Homs was an area of Syria that has always had an issue with the Assad government. And by Assad government, I include his father in this. And that has always been a political tension issue. When they originally started protesting it, it was because of the, partly because of the flood, partly because of government ineptitude in where that flood happened. And so when they started protesting it, originally, the United States was like, hey, Assad, you know, we get it. There's protests. You have to be like clamp down on it a little bit, whatever, right? And then he went too far. Now, that's where then it started to spiral out of control. And we can tell then the great powers got involved. And including in those great powers, that includes Israel, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Russia, us. Like everybody jumped into that war because people are fucking stupid.
You're going far. Now, why I'm specifically mentioning Syria is because this is again by the admission of United States themselves, you know, like years later, but they have shipped weapons to at the time peaceful protesters from Libya. That's not.
I think their timeline's a little off. That those weapon shipments didn't happen until after Assad started to send in the military to quash that protest. As far as I know,
he definitely did. He definitely did.
As far as I know, I think it happened after that. So we'll have to agree to disagree this.
So now we're interrupting each other, but not meanly. I just want to be clear because now I don't understand what the two of you are getting at.
Okay, so
go ahead.
My point is that the U.S.
and this is also just another thing. This is getting far afield from where the topic is. A lot of I'm only bringing this up because I understand why you're doing it. The audience doesn't seem to understand at all why you're bringing this up. So
and the audience. My point is that the U.S. shipped weapons to Syria to specifically combat Bashar al-Assad, to stop natural gas pipeline that was supposed to go from Iran, Iraq, through Syria, then to Europe. Bashar al-Assad, who is the closest Russian ally.
Yeah,
that is waging war. That is, I'm sorry, but that is literally, yes, it is. That is how modern war is being waged. It is not being waged through sending in tanks. That is, like Russia style.
Real
that is
quick,
why it's
real
so
quick, Paul. So get to a point, conclude it, so that I can give Cypher an opportunity to give his reply. Go ahead.
My point is that that Russia in 2012 was looking at their closest ally, whose country went into complete hellhole as a result of America's putting in and shipping in their weapons. We might disagree on the timelines and stuff like that.
Okay,
so the reason.
Go ahead.
So I'll go ahead and respond. So to me, the primary reason that Russia got involved in this is because of the because of their military alliance with Syria and also the being able to have a foothold within the Middle East. Now, it is true that Russia is going to look at this as being some sort of like proxy attack on themselves, because Russia is kind of not paranoid necessarily, but that's just how their worldview is. They look at this always. Yes. None of this justifies any of the action, though. I don't care what they do. I don't care what their justifications are. I care what is correct and proper to do. As soon as Assad started bombing his own fucking people in order to quash the rebellion against him, he lost a moral authority mandate to be the leader of that country anymore. Now, whether or not the United States should have gotten involved, Russia should have gotten involved, that's a separate question. But as soon as that happened, everybody should have been like, everybody, and I include Russia in this, I know they're not going to do this, but everybody should have been like, yo, what the fuck? You shouldn't be doing that stuff. And that is where we come to this. Russia didn't give a shit. Russia wanted to make sure that Assad kept power. So Russia did everything it could to make sure that Assad kept power. Assad wanted to make sure he kept power. So what did Assad do? Not even halfway through, because it was originally, there was no ISIS. ISIS was not involved in this at all. There was al-Nusra, which is a al-Qaeda affiliate, and then a couple of other Islamist kind of people in the East, because they are culturally different than the western part of Syria. Go figure. That's how fucking geography works when you have rivers going through a country. Yay. So what ended up happening was that they got together and they formed their own kind of militia groups. Some of those were actual former Syrian army units that turned against Assad specifically because he started to attack civilians. And a little bit in there, I'm sure there's people like, hey, it's my turn to have power now. Let's go. Right? Now, so when all that happened,
if I may,
Syria started releasing terrorists that it had in its prisons to augment the terrorist groups because they wanted to maintain power. We can't ignore these things if we're talking about what the CIA might be doing, what the United States might be doing, giving weapons to people, etc. Because everybody was doing this. Everybody was.
Go ahead, Paul.
Cypher, you're looking at this again from more perspective, from all of this. That, as you pointed out, that doesn't fucking matter to Putin. It doesn't matter to Russia. So why are you looking at it like from that perspective?
Because that's what we have to look on it from whatever or not when we're assigning primary blame on a situation. We have to look at these things and actually weigh them and say, okay, everybody sucks. No one's moral here. Okay, who did the most wrong actions? In Syria, the most wrong actions started, because this is how things start somewhere, started with Syria, started with Assad. And then Putin's like, well, we can't have Assad lose because Assad started losing. Let's send in our bombers so that we can bomb them. And then, let's not bomb the terrorists. Let's let the terrorists come in and sandwich the actual moderates. So there's only one group that can actually depose Assad, and that's the terrorists. And maybe the West will stop fucking with us. And what had happened? That's exactly what happened. Is that right? It's not right. Is that right? Is that a power move? Yes, it's a power move. Who deserves primary blame? Those people.
Cypher, if I may, because we have here problems with the timing, that it doesn't match. Like in your words, when in your mind did Assad the bombing? You know what I mean? And when
I don't know exactly when the bombing happens. I just know that the bombing. I think the bombings happened after the civil war actually started to kick off, but there was killings of civilians in homes prior to the civil war kicking off. That is what kicked off the civil war officially.
Right. Okay. So
I think those were regular military operations.
We disagree on this point, and we cannot verify it right now.
Sure.
So
yeah.
If we move past it. Yeah.
I'm fair with that.
Yeah. So.
So back to how this affects Ukraine.
Sure. From Russian perspective, that now I'll name it up. Yeah. So you have 96 stolen election. You have the Chechen, support for Chechen fighters in southern Russia. You have then what they perceive as attack on their ally, friend, and closest ally in Syria, and the year after. Euromaidan happens, and the United States is heavily involved there, chummy with neo-Nazis, etc. And I'm just saying those snipers, well, I highly doubt those were the Russian snipers. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Do you not
in
understand his
Maidan.
point?
No,
So-
I understand. I don't. This is the problem when we're talking about things with absence morality here, is because we're Russia. Okay, let's remove morality completely from the equation, right? Let's remove it completely from the equation. Let's even remove culpability from the equation. Let's just look at what the facts are, right? And we disagree on some of those facts. Not only do we disagree on some of those facts, but the issue is that it seems to me that Logical is pretty much not, I don't mean justifying as in morally right or whatever, but justifying Russia's action in Russia's mind, based on Russian paranoia. That's why I'm having a hard time with this, because I don't want to justify Russia's paranoia, because Russia's paranoia isn't the thing that we should be even talking about.
Okay, and you are correct, and that is my mistake. I do apologize for that. My point, like in the culpability of the United States, if you will, is that the US knew about these red lines. They knew what reaction Russia would have, and they specifically chose to step over those red lines in order to have that reaction.
So you think that the United States played 20D chess with Russia and baited them in?
It's not that complicated, because
so Russia got Russia got baited though, right? That's what you're saying.
Baited, into stupid moves, yeah.
Okay,
yeah, absolutely.
So why should I care if the moves are stupid?
I'll ask you this. We know they have crossed those. There's a war, and my point is that if I didn't get into it, and I can't get into it because it requires so many sources that we would be sitting here reading, what I mean, just source after source.
Yeah, it's so much information because this is I get you.
This I might add is also why I don't do content on this topic, because it drives me nuts. So go ahead.
I don't blame you. I will Google
go ahead.
You explain it like Canada. If United States of America's government would act differently, still reasonably, not throwing Ukraine to the walls, etc., there would not be war. If EU would act, like reasonably, because they are assholes in this as well, there would not be war. If Russia would act differently, there would not be war. Now, I cannot vote. I cannot change anything about Russia. We cannot overthrow Putin otherwise than going into World War III, risking nuclear holocaust. What we can do is to find out what and why this war happened and hold the people specifically responsible that could have done something differently, but specifically chose not to, responsible, and remove them out of diplomacy, because this is willing catastrophe of diplomacy.
So to let me understand this correctly. You put the primary culpability on the United States, despite the fact that Russia could have not been baited.
No, I would split it 33%, between EU, USA, and Russia. If every single
that would still make the West be primarily responsible for this.
You could kind of put that there, but I would argue, this is my mind. You can disagree. The EU and US are not completely on the same boat. They are, let's say.
Well, so my question would be, what would you have done differently to prevent this? Go ahead.
Not restrict, for example, Nord Stream 2. Let it be.
Nord Stream 2 was largely left be until the war kicked off. Am I wrong about that?
You're completely
wrong. When did Nord Stream 2 start getting sanctioned? Because Germany still approved it, and they still got it. It was still being built.
Right. Okay. So 2011, Fukushima happens. Germans fucking freak out. Holy shit! We can have yes. Now they need to abandon because they were idiots and they forced their government to abandon nuclear energy. There was a gigantic hole in their energy market. Yeah, they went to Russia and said, "Hey, we would like another Nord Stream because it's cool." They didn't want to do it through Ukraine because Ukraine and Russia had a drama in 90s and 2000s because Ukraine was fucking broke and they couldn't afford the gas, so Russia was cutting them off, etc., etc. Corporate bullshit, you know what I mean? I would. By the way, source is Oxford University. You know what I mean on this. I'm not pulling this out of my ass. Yeah. So they wanted to go, you know, like through the Baltic Sea, and basically plug this hole, you know, like in their market. Yeah, that was stupidity of EU and Germany, because EU was busy with other shit instead of solving this issue.
I understand that Germany doesn't have the same issues with that Japan had with its nuclear power plants. Specifically, Fukushima should never have been built the way it was, or if it was going to be built that way, it should have been much more protected against tsunamis. It wasn't protected against tsunamis enough. So I get all that. Germany needed the oil, needed the natural gas in order to fill its energy market. Can we fast forward to when it started to when the United States or whoever else got involved started to fuck with that? Because I think everybody understands the reason.
US was trying to sanction it, you know, like in the early process. That was, you know, 2011 to 2013. Didn't work. Work was still being done. Well, oopsie doopsie, Euromaidan happens, invasion of Ukraine, etc. You know what I mean?
And this is the part that I already admitted to, where the United States, Turkey, and Iraq were trying to build a similar pipeline that would have ran through Ukraine, right? It would have ran through Ukraine.
No. It was Qatari pipeline, if I remember correctly. It was supposed to go through Syria, then Turkey, up to Greece, up to Balkans.
Yeah. So they're competing interest. I don't see why that's necessarily a bad thing.
I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. Absolutely. But I'm saying we can get into the details. The 2014 bullshit was a downright coup sponsored by the United States.
So that's where we disagree.
I was wondering if we were going to get to this one.
Yeah, we will get to that. We will get to that. Yeah. Now, fast forward, after people basically cool out, you know what I mean, and stuff like that, the pipeline is still being finished.
Yep.
Yeah, and USA is putting sanctions against Russia, against the European companies that are working on it, saying, no, you're not going to build it. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, against international law. It was completely it was wrong, etc.
International, what international law was
precisely? If it's the sanction, there was something like bordering on sovereignty, etc., etc. You know what I mean?
If you can, after this debate, if you can send me what your reference point is, that I'm not saying that you're wrong. I just need to read more about it. That's
right. Let's I actually need a technical break here. I have some real life stuff. You know what happening here.
It has been an hour. If you guys want to take a 5-minute recess.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
I'll stick around. I can talk to your audience via radio since they want to.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know what the hell I'm fucking talking about. All right, Nova, I don't agree with you politically. I think that's the reason why you keep calling me a fucking idiot in this chat. So I would appreciate you if you stopped trying to mind read me and assume that I don't know what I'm talking about simply because we disagree. The CIA has done fucked up shit. That does not justify what is going on in Ukraine, and I think that's what you're trying to do. Have a little faith, have a little charitability. That would go a long way, in my opinion. If anybody else wants to talk to me while he's on break because of family issue or family thing going on, not necessarily an issue, let me know.
That sounds fine. So I think overall, though, you've been doing fine. Just don't allow the chat because you're here to talk to Paul, and there's going to be dumb people in the chat or smart people in the chat. I disagree with you, but they're not debating you. And then I know. You want to come on? You want to throw down with him? Let's do it. And he doesn't want to do it. So.
It's just the only reason that it's kind of distracting me. And I'm not telling you it's your stream. You can run it any way you want. It's on the screen, so I'm looking at Paul and I can see it at the same time. And I'm like, so it's hitting my ADD a little bit.
No, that's fair. And I think I can go ahead and turn it off if it's bugging you as a guest. I leave that.
No, keep it on. Keep it on. I'm gonna just turn this way. So audience, I'm gonna look this way so I can ignore the chat.
No problem. It just what it is that it kind of lets everybody on every other platform.
Yeah, I understand.
Theoretically, although I don't have as many people watching on Twitch or anything anyway. So, all right, you guys ready?
I'll answer NL's question really quick if you don't mind.
Sure. Go ahead.
So NL polling that's good. Gallup, Pew, YouGov, Russelman's, if you take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Cato does decent polling, etc. All right, I'm done.
Okay.
Lovely.
Alrighty.
If I may then continue.
Yes,
that.
please continue.
So after the Maidan, we get to that. Yeah. Basically, the Nord Stream 2 was stopped, etc. And out of EU stopped it themselves, but they still goddamn needed the gas, so they went to Russia again. Hey, will you chill out and have the natural gas, you know what I mean, basically flow here? America again got them, you know what I mean, involved and saying, no, you are not building it. No way. Because now here are the reasons that they gave. First, that would make Germany way too dependent on Russia for resources. Now, this claim is complete poppycock because Germany was already dependent on Russia for resources because 4 other pipelines were already going to Germany
I'm sensing a
Russia.
reply here, so
Sure.
I would just say that yes, they were dependent, but this would make them more dependent simply because the flow would be so good, and then that there would be a cheaper price, so it would not be competitive with other energy sources because of that pipeline. And I think that's a reasonable geopolitical fear, to be honest. So
we'll get to that, you know, like a bit more. Yeah. Another reason was that they were saying that it will betray Ukraine and stuff like that, you know, because of transition fees.
Wait, can you? I just didn't understand you. If you just repeat what you said, that's my problem.
Yeah, sure. If they would bypass Ukraine, it would betray them. They would not be giving them money, you know, paying them. Which I'm just saying that's economical. You know what I mean? That's a business decision, you know, like in the first place. You know? That they should instead be buying American freedom gas. Yeah. So those were the points. Now, Merkel met with Biden and completely destroyed all those points because they are. Oh, I forget one, the most important for you, dear Americans.
Can you tell me what year this happened, just so I understand the timeline? You know, it can be a rough estimate.
Sure, that this was a continuous process from 2016 up until 2021.
Okay, so after the Trump election, mostly,
and after Biden election, you know. So the most important point here, dear American audience, listen here. This is not a matter of opinion. I have listed various scholarly articles, and it is just supply, demand. It will make your energies more expensive if EU is cut off from Russian gas and are forced to buy American gas. I'm just asking, did anyone run on that platform? Hey, we'll make your energies more expensive. I don't think so, but
no, but that was partly the reason why Trump and Biden both have allowed more drilling since 2018. I want to say is when it started to kick back up. Of course, you know, COVID notwithstanding, everybody's output dropped during COVID. So
sure, but still stands. You know what I mean? Like you will have the supply demand that is
sure, but you know whether or not that's something. I mean, now we can disagree on whether or not that's something that should be endured or not.
Right. So now Merkel specifically took all those points away from American administrations, and they didn't care. They've continued pushing these sanctions.
What do you mean took the points away?
That she recognized
them, or just didn't care?
Now that she recognized that Germany is too dependent on Russia, and that they will build LNG terminals in order to ship in, if necessary, LNG gas instead of the Russian gas. You know, so you have a competitive market. You know, you don't have a monopoly, and Russia cannot, you know, put that much influence over it. You know, then they recognize that yes, it would leave Ukraine in a bind, and that Germany will, from their pocket, be compensating for any drops in transition fees. Those would not be occurring because don't forget that was plugging a hole in the German energy market, right? So that the transit of the natural gas for Ukraine should stay the same, but if it would not, Germany would compensate Ukraine, for that, and also that they would chip in, I believe it was 1 billion euros into LNG terminals in Ukraine, so they can also ship, they can buy gas on the international markets.
For a point of clarity for myself and I think as well as the audience, though, didn't this lead to some of the sanctions being lifted on Nord Stream to allow it to continue to be built because of what Germany did? Okay,
Precisely.
so
Wait.
Why is this a problem?
Wait here, yeah. So first of all, America clearly have shown that they can influence European markets, and Russia is clearly dependent on those European markets. But not only that, the Nord Stream never went active. You need to take. This is stupid. I think.
Well, yeah, the Nord Stream didn't go active because the war kicked off, right?
No, that's not true. That's not true. It was stopped after it was finished. Some German internal things that they have recognized that it is not up to standards, not up to law, and stuff like that. You cannot have corporate structure that the pipeline cannot be owned by the same people who own also the gas
Okay,
supply,
that's right. And that happened 2019, right?
2021.
I think that's what happened.
2021.
It was that far in.
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was a little earlier, but yeah, I do remember these things happening. Didn't Russia blame the United States for this as well?
Yes.
So again,
but you need to here's the thing.
So Germany should have ignored its own internal laws to placate Russia? What about its citizens? Doesn't Germany have to also balance its own internal things?
I fully agree here with you, because here we are getting into optics and what is the difference between what is and how it looks like. Because you have a paranoid Russia. You have a paranoid Russia, and I'm sorry, like the United States have already given Russia a good reason to be paranoid. You cannot deny that. If you admit. I'm
not going to deny it. I just think they're maybe a bit over paranoid, and that is primarily due to Russian history.
But is it new?
Everybody hates one follow-up point. Everybody hates Kissinger. Kissinger's a fucking genius. Read his book on world order. He explains all of this. It's so succinct. Like, it's a thick book. I have it somewhere. I actually had to rebuy a copy because I accidentally had a nosebleed while I was reading it in Afghanistan. So yeah. Just everybody read the On World Order. It explains all this nonsense and how Russia views the world, and it's very accurate.
Sure. And but is it new? Is this world view of Russia new? They have always viewed it, what I mean, as such.
I think there is some differences between how Putin specifically operates within this worldview and other people such as Gorbachev or Yeltsin and others. I think that this worldview has always been a part of Russia, but there are some people that are a bit more realpolitik with that worldview within the Russia, the greats, the czars, whatever. And I think Putin is a little bit on the further end of that spectrum.
Okay. Now, optics, yeah. You have just what I mean, from Russian perspective, the Nord Stream 2 was cancelled, and they have obviously blamed America. Because, if I may, America was doing something that was incredibly fucked up before that, trying to stop the Nord Stream 2, which is none of their fucking business. I'm sorry, and that is me saying.
Okay, so if that's none of their business, then shouldn't some of the former Soviet bloc countries not be any of Russia's business? Why are they in Moldova?
No.
Why are they in?
You cannot look. Hey, here, if I may, what I mean. Here, I'm talking as a European. America should stick to their fucking shit and leave us, what I mean, with our intern, with whom we do business, and with whom
Right,
we
but
do not do
whenever
business. Well,
whenever there is internal European conflict, it ends up blowing up into a greater war that sucks everybody else in. So
yeah, we are
why
supposed to
should
be.
that be ignored? I mean, if hey, I there is this budding thing in the United States polity that we're fucking what is it, Fortress Americana, the West of the world can go fuck itself. I mean, if that's the way we want to go about it, fine, but you got to understand what that means.
We would have to go a bit, like out of the topic, and it's a bit.
I would just say that
But-
I think that what is going on in Europe isn't not America's business. It is America's business because America is interconnected.
So you
globally
wait.
with everything.
So I'm sorry if you are telling us, like with whom we can do business and with whom we cannot do business. You are acting as our daddy. Is that what you're saying, that we cannot make decisions for ourselves, bro?
You're acting as a what? I just didn't understand you.
Like you are basically saying that, like USB fucking talking into with whom we decide to do business with and with.
Oh, I don't think it's that much of a I don't think it's that much of a big stick policy that the United States is. Does it have influence? Yes, but this notion that the United States has no material interest or no even ideological or moral interest in what happens with Europe, I just reject. We're talking about how Russia has a material interest in what happens in Germany, what happens in UK, what happens in Scandinavia, or whatever else. Whatever happens within its quote unquote sphere of influence, with Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. The former Czech Republic, Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo, Albania, Moldova, etc., etc. I think I made my point here. I don't want to rabble off all the countries.
So if US literally threatens, I will quote. Senator Ted Cruz sent a letter to various companies in Europe. Say,
well, why do I care what? Sorry,
just to be clear, even if you don't care, he's still a senator of the United States. Just
yes.
a thought. Yeah, that's all. There's a political
and head of influential committees, etc. So he literally sent a letter in which said, "Stop work on this pipeline immediately, or face potentially lethal consequences."
Yes, Ted Cruz did an idiot thing. Ted Cruz also has to placate his base, just like Russia has to just like Putin has to placate his base. If we're going to talk about real politics and talk about how people are supposed to view the world, then we have to understand that people are going to do these kind of things in order to maintain their power positions. But that doesn't give Russia the authority.
You misunderstand. That was the letter, but U.S. government has also approved of these sanctions against these companies. And how it works
but is that lethal?
Because the companies, all the bank transfers and stuff like that goes eventually through U.S. banks sooner or later. If U.S. says, hey, we say you cannot do business with this company, all the banks will block them, will freeze their funds.
We weaponize the SWIFT system. Yeah, I understand this.
Sure. And I'm saying, fuck off.
Sure.
It's none of your business.
You can say fuck off, and you can believe it is none of our business, but I would counter that it's just as much as our business as what happens, what Russia says happens in the UK. Like, so if we're talking about how superpowers act, and we're talking about all the ways in which that, like, we can't talk about morality. We got to talk about who's primarily at fault. And like, here, this is just what governments are going to do. And like, why, and like, I don't care about what Ted Cruz said, because Ted Cruz is a sitting senator. He doesn't have the power to actually enact this policy. And if that was around 2016, he was doing that to try to look better than Trump on this issue, to the
2018.
Yeah. I'm done.
2018 it happened, by the way.
Or 2018. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But my point is still, I think my point still stands.
So again, you are telling me that you will decide what is best for us.
No, I will tell. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the United States will do things that are in its interest, just like every other country will do things in its interest. And if we're talking about a realpolitik view of the world, everybody's got to act within the realm of this and change their positions, how they're going to do it. And that can't be used as just Ted Cruz signing this letter can't be used as justification for Putin to invade Ukraine any more than Putin saying something to his base, his nationalists, can be used to try to like sanction Nord Stream 2. Like if it's either good for the goose, good for the gander, or it's not, and we have to just deal with it.
I've mentioned that letter as just what was basically being told to those companies, together with those sanctions. What it meant and stuff like that, how it's viewed. Now I will say this: if the Nord Stream 2 would go through and it would not be blocked, the war would not be happening because Russia would have a thing to lose.
And then I would say that if that is the case, then why didn't Putin just be like, oh, okay, I understand that you have internal politics that has to be situated. This might take a year, but you want it because I have you over a barrel. Let's get this done and not invade Ukraine.
Because United States of America have clearly shown their ability to interrupt the Russians' interest in Europe,
and then they showed.
Let him finish.
Sorry.
And then Russia was like, we're losing this European market sooner or later, because United States of America is far better at this game than we are. They can influence Europe far better than we can. We are losing it sooner or later. I'm saying that's their position. I'm not saying that I agree with it. Yeah? They were stupid about it. Yeah? I can tell you how. We will shift instead of that to China. Fuck Europe. We are gonna lose it sooner or later. Let's secure our western border. Let's basically get what we can before we lose the ability to defeat Ukraine militarily, because Ukraine was getting shipments of weapons more and more, was getting stronger. So there was there was, from their perspective, a ticking time bomb. Sorry.
My point is, I say, so to counter your point in this is that Merkel ended up convincing the United States. Honestly, Merkel's a badass. She's a great leader. For Germany, we can quibble about other things. All right, managed to convince the United States to allow Germany to have Nord Stream 2 and keep Ukraine involved in this. She masterfully played this, and the United States is like, hey, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And that was the plan going forward, right? When Germany had internal politics shift because of not even politics, this is just law. Where the European Union isn't Russia. They can't just Merkel can't just come in and be like, do the thing and do it. There's procedures. Putin's not an idiot. Well, I guess Putin might be an idiot, but he should have understood that has to go through the process. And if that process is going to go through, because the United States has already signed off on this, because the United States has already did this, because we have the Germans over a barrel, we have to allow this to go. If we allow this to go through, we're good. He didn't make that decision. He instead went and decided to invade Ukraine because of whatever. I don't even care what the reason is. That is the dumbest decision. And if that's the dumbest decision you can make in that instance, then we can't say that the United States is primarily responsible for the war in Ukraine because Russia fucked up.
I'm not saying that they are primarily responsible. It's like I split it, like 3-3-3. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't even split it 33%. That Russia's under your thing, Russia's 70% of responsible for this, because that is ridiculous.
It is
level of galaxy brain understand you.
Let him answer you.
Yeah, Sefer. Here's the thing. So Nord Stream gets blocked. You're right. In Russia, the nationalists get really strong because they are saying what I have just said, that Russia will lose European markets sooner or later, and they put immense pressure.
But then you don't. But
listen, wait a sec. And what was what being done? There was more and more weapons being shipped to Ukraine. Not only there were more and more soldiers and weapons being shipped to Europe. There was and I will quote, American weapons of unprecedented number being shipped to a strategic port in Alexandroupolis in Greece. You probably didn't hear about it, which is strange because it was just before the war would kick out. You know what I mean?
Can you repeat that? You said a specific thing about Greece. I didn't understand you. I'm a little hard of hearing.
That was sure. No, I bet like it's my also accent because I roll my R's and don't make rah sound, like you guys. So, U.S. was shipping weapons, and I now will quote, on unprecedented scale to Greek port of Alexandroupolis and then shipping them basically to Ukraine. And it is like they are fucking getting ready for war. And here's the if I may, where I honestly see it as absolute breakdown of diplomacy. Before the war kickstarted, that was in December 2022.
Make sure that you make sure that you clarify this quickly because he was waiting to answer you about what you said earlier. Okay, go ahead.
Putin called Biden and said, "Look, there's a. By the way, I can later fish out the article specifically about that. Yeah, Putin said, "Hey, give me a promise that Ukraine will not enter NATO, and I will not invade them." Biden to which responded, "I cannot give that promise, or I will not give that promise." Now, it's stupidity because you can condition that promise be, if you don't invade Ukraine, we will not get them into NATO.
You can't make that promise because the president doesn't have the authority to make that promise. Putin should have understood this. Also that the Ukrainian constitution, and I'm almost certain I'm not mistaken, but there's 10% doubt, so I won't say for certain entirely, also says that they would not join NATO in a military alliance.
That's not
officially
true.
In a capacity.
No.
Or that was being talked about.
Yes.
Hold on.
So
that should be
you got it precisely
I would think.
opposite.
Yeah, go ahead.
They had before that they had the desire to join NATO. I will fish it out, like later on. And when Putin invaded, Zelensky basically said, "Hey, oof, pull back. We will say that we don't want to enter NATO." But there was a promise that Zelensky couldn't again deliver, the same as Biden couldn't deliver on that promise. But if I may, you are way too much caught up on the technicality of it. There could have been an official procedure, negotiations between the United States of America and Russia to basically say, "Hey, Ukraine, we will stay with NATO out of Ukraine."
But Russia already did not believe these official statements because of the expansion of NATO in the 90s to include Poland. No, these negotiations are already a thing that the United States has done and reneged on. So these negotiations that you're suggesting that would have maybe placated Putin, I don't think would have actually placated Putin. And I think it was just trying to buy time. But that's me.
Yeah, you are correct. It might not have been. We will never find out. You know what I mean? Now, that was maybe the nationalists gave Putin, "Hey, you get them fucking, sign some kind of piece of paper. We will, what I mean, chill the fuck out."
So do you think when Putin came to Biden with this request, he just needed something to show the nationalist? Is that what you believe?
Possibly? Like we will never know. You know what I mean?
Okay, like, we won't know, but that's a high possibility. Okay, to me, I don't think that is, but reasonable people can disagree on it, so I'm not going to fight over it.
Sure. Yeah.
So here's a question from the audience. What is your solution, Cypher?
Solution to what exactly? We've been talking about the complications of this entire thing, and I think we got both sides of the arguments really well on this. So kudos to Logical for being very well prepared for this.
Actually, I would like to apologize because I'm not nearly as good. Like I prefer to do content because I can prepare.
Sure.
Like squeeze it and stuff like that. I have a bit trouble here, like explaining everything.
Yeah, no, I think you've done very, very well though. So I just need a little bit more clarity on this. Ending the war. Okay, I think it's.
Yeah, is that what you're suggesting, Darla? Ending the war. Go ahead.
And I if I may also,
you're both going to get an opportunity to answer that. But just want to be clear, actually, because that was also what was in the super chat from Tam. So maybe we could save that until like maybe the last 10 minutes. Finish what your point was, Paul, because I do want to get. We have about a half hour left.
Yeah.
I want to get into the
Sure.
was there a coup?
So Scrappy has a good point, and again, I'm not the best at this. Biden could have absolutely pressured NATO that they would veto, because all the power lies ultimately with President of the United States. They have a veto over any new member.
They
to
do,
NATO.
but I don't think that power rests within the president to just veto that. I could be wrong. I might be wrong about that one. But even if Biden's like, oh yeah, I'll veto it, that's going to have its own political ramifications within the United States. It would have easily led to him losing the election, election in 2024. So making any kind of determination of that whatsoever is just going to backfire. And so I don't think it would have been believed by anybody. Like, to be honest, I don't think the nationalists would have believed it either. They would have wanted something like in a treaty or whatever, and that just is not going to happen.
Cypher, if I might ask you, if I would convince you of basically what I'm trying to do with my documentary is track the people that I believe are responsible, specifically people, not governments, specifically people are tracking, and I take it as police and investigation, and I look at what they have been doing throughout the history, what were their moves and stuff like that, and I believe that I have a strong point to make that they have been responsible for the 96 stolen Russian president or Russian presidential election. The support to Chechen fighters. They have been also responsible for Iraq war. Neocons, by the way, if you are fishing,
No, I know neocons. Yeah, I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, they have been also responsible to a degree for Russian-Georgian war, to a degree. I'm not saying completely, but it's basically the same thing. Pushing NATO down everyone's throat, even if they don't want it. They have been responsible for Libyan civil war. They have been responsible for Syrian civil war, and also for the fucking Maidan, because they have popped up there too.
By the way, guys, this is a compliment on the conversation. People are enjoying it, so that's a good sign. So
good.
Continue. Cypher, did you have a reply to what he just said?
Not. Can you restate your question?
If I would convince you that all of these things are true, basically, successfully, and my point, I'm sorry, I didn't make it completely.
That's what I'm like.
Yeah, we basically take things for granted from our governments to a big degree. We trust them way too much, and we don't investigate. I'm trying to raise enough questions as to what the fuck were we doing there, and then we should look closer into it, because a lot of these things are classified, and I'm saying that they are not necessarily in mine, in yours, in everyone's self-interest, and that sometimes, rather more often than not, they are downright fucking evil. And we should verify. We should not trust that much.
I don't necessarily trust the U.S. government in all these things. I'm having a hard time understanding what your question to me exactly is.
If I would convince you that there were specifically people responsible for all those things that I've named, all those wars and stuff like that.
Specific people like Rumsfeld, Bush, whatever, right? These are not people you're necessarily blaming, but I get what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah. If I would to point a finger and say that these people have been always around and have interesting, I'm not taking conspiracies. I'm talking about literally proven things and stuff like that. I'm just connecting the dots. Yeah. If I would connect all those dots and convince you that they have been to a degree, to more or less a degree, responsible for all those wars, all that bloodshed, would you be like, you know what? Maybe we should fucking look closer, on this thing.
I think everybody should look closer. So if you can make that point, go for it. Like I'd watch it.
Yeah, I literally, I literally can't hear. I'm working on it for a year. Again, and it's immensely complex. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess then because now we're getting down to the last half hour. I really want to hear you guys hash out the question of, was there a coup in Ukraine or not? I'm going to let Paul start, and then Cypher, if you need to make any clarifications, go right ahead.
Can we just have a point of clarity? So there's a difference between a coup and a revolution, right? Just to make sure everybody is on the same page.
So yes. So when we're dealing with this, Paul, make sure that you're clear in defining exactly what it was.
Okay. I will make the first broad and ask Cypher if he agrees with that. If I would say that someone got control of the media, riled up people, like specifically funded groups that were radical and have killed many people in order to specifically rile up the crowd, to the crowd then overthrowing the government, would you call that a coup or would you call that a revolution?
That's a hard one. I would need to know more specifics. It leans towards a soft coup, if people know the difference between the two, but not necessarily in and of itself.
Okay.
There's
and
particulars.
especially if these people who give the funding, etc., come from abroad of that country, that they want a regime change themselves. That would you?
I mean, there's still the what is it? The agency. That's what I'm looking for.
Right.
So there's still the agency of the people that are involved that are doing it, and maybe those grievances, like you said previously, those grievances might be actually true. Right. And so if they're true, we can't necessarily remove the agency from the people that are doing it, even if there was undue influence being done from overseas.
Okay. Would you like? If I would have to send you on Twitter later than a bit, if you would watch it and stuff like that. But I will make this point, and we can get into evidence later. The US government was specifically funding literal neo-Nazis who wanted to overthrow the government at the time. It was Yanukovych.
Which so you say the U.S. and then which agency? Which groups and then
NGOs, the National Endowment for Democracy.
For democracy, that's the one. I
that is specifically funded through by State Department. And if I may, this is not me saying, this is themselves who said it in '91, I believe.
Yeah,
they are offshoot of CIA specifically to overthrow governments. Again, I can fish it up somewhere, you know what I mean, after the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the director said it himself. Yeah.
Now, it's like I could see steam coming out of your ears. Are you sure you're okay with that, Cypher?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't mean you were mad. It was just like it was the thought bubble was processing over your head, like we were in a video game or something. It's okay. Go ahead.
I got it.
Yeah. So you have a lot of support for literal neo-Nazis. Yeah. You then have justified, you know what I mean? This is, by the way, you need to understand how U.S. government operates in this. They don't manufacture crises most of the time. They just amplify them. That they are, you know what I mean, like specifically homegrown, but
like the Russians did in Eastern Ukraine.
Precisely. Actually, yeah. Specific, very precisely, yeah. And there have been these protests against the government, and someone at one point started shooting protesters, a sniper.
Yes.
Now you have mentioned
was claimed to be by the police, at least from the investigations that have been done. Whether or not we can believe those investigations or not is another story, and there is a lot of stuff that we don't know. So there is reason to be skeptical.
Right. I lay in front of you the facts, and we can then later on, for example, you can ask me if I have the receipts. Because again, time constraints. Yeah. Someone was shooting the people. Now there was an intercepted call, not between Nuland and Piat, but between two EU officials, where I believe he was foreign minister to Estonia, guys who really hate Russians, and who was calling with EU official and was saying, "Hey, I met this doctor, and she was telling me that how the people are shot." Both the police and the protesters, it's the same fucking handwriting, the same caliber, the same rifle. It's the fucking same. And what the EU lady basically said was, "Oof, we need to look closer to that, but we should keep it quiet." Now, this is literally conspiracy here. You know what I mean? That's not any like you have a beginning stages of conspiracy, literally, because if they need to keep it quiet, I don't know if it's true or not, because I don't think you can.
There's a reasonable explanation. Well, not a reasonable explanation. There is a that's the best. I'm going to flub how I'm going to explain this, just because I don't have the right words for me with me right now. But there is a reasonable expectation of why they would need to keep it quiet, because if there's an investigation going on, whatever they find, whether it's true or not, and if it's public, it's going to seed doubt into whatever, because politics is stupid. So while the investigation is going on, it's the same reason why we don't reveal information when we investigate criminals and everything else in the United States. And while investigation's going on, you don't want to accidentally bias the audience and potential jurors or whatever have you. So it's them saying they need to keep it hush hush. I don't see as a necessary budding of a conspiracy. That is more just an acknowledgement of the reality of what can happen in these investigations.
That is fair enough. Yeah. Now, there have been. I'm actually looking for it right now. I was idiot that I didn't prepare it. There was a journalist who was filming and who was shot at or just over his head from Hotel Ukraine, where foreign journalists were located, and he said that he seen a guy that had the uniform and stuff like that of protesters, and the Hotel Ukraine was at the time in hands of protesters. Doesn't mean anything. That could have been someone, for example, clad, basically false flagging it.
Yeah, it could have been. Accelerationists exist, right? So there's reason to, like I said, there's reason to be skeptical. I'm not going to say there's any. I'm not going to say somebody is being unreasonable, immoral, etc. For being a little head scratchy on this, because the things on the ground were very fluid, and we don't have all the facts, and reasonable people can disagree on it. If some Nazi decided to let's shoot at some protesters because then it will win, hey, that's a very reasonable possibility. I don't think the United States was directly involved in that, but yeah,
could be. So, and now you move on. Now the government collapses. There is, as I mentioned, the anti-constitutional vote on banning the Russian language. But I forgot to mention there who was doing the security, who was surrounding all those guys. You know what I mean?
That was the whatever party it was, the
Svoboda.
Yeah, the
neo-Nazis,
the neo-Nazi group, the Banderites, right?
So
that's what they
how
they
can
are.
you tell me? How can you tell me it's not overthrowing of a government when
because you can have different groups.
Let him finish.
Okay,
Rob, if you have specifically the U.S. government is working with neo-Nazis. I'm not saying with pro-democracy guys. That would be fine. You know what I mean? That would be filling your narrative, or not yours. Maybe Adams and Sitch's. You know what I mean? That U.S. is just a fucking good benefactor, etc. Why in the fuck were they working with neo-Nazis? Not literal fucking neo-Nazis.
Because
Why?
the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and desperate groups are going to end up pulling together in order to push
and there
for
you
their own
go.
thing. That's going to always be the case. I don't understand what this proves.
So, U.S. is working with Svoboda Party. There is a shooting of snipers that shoot at both sides, which is something that Putin would definitely not do, because it just riles the crowd up. It will result in overthrow of the government. Who would do that? As you said, maybe some neo-Nazi, maybe someone, maybe completely indirected, unguided. Yeah, but you then end up with a parliament surrounded and protected by armed Svoboda militias. How is it not overthrowing of a government when you have literally
I don't. Okay, so I don't. So to me, we both agree that the government was overthrown. What we disagree is whether or not it was a Western-backed coup that overthrew the government. So the reason why I say we can't. Well, I don't believe it's a Western-backed coup is because all these desperate groups were all working together, and not every single one of them were in line with what the United States wanted. That's why I'm saying that. Not only that is that when Yanukovych, right? That's the person. That's the right. No,
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, Yanukovych. Okay, so when Yanukovych originally said, "Okay, we're going to go with the EU," that group put like that desperate groups that everybody wanted to be closer to Europe was like, "Yes, my man, let's go, let's do it," right? And then, what is it? A year and a half, 2 years later, he's like, "Oh, never mind." Now, why he said, never mind? Hey, the Russian deal was pretty good, but that doesn't mean it was the best deal. And we can't know for certain whether or not Putin himself gave Yanukovych extra money, security, told him that you can stay in power for his life as long as he does this. We can't know any of those instances either. Right. So that's why I say this is not necessarily, and I lean towards it not being, and when I say lean, 90% lean to it not being a Western-backed coup because of all this stuff that actually happened.
Right. And so here's the thing. Because EU was Maidan protests happen, there's shit tons of violence, but no shooting yet. But you know what I mean? It's like it's quite hard clashes between the police and the protesters. You know, they throw a brick.
People in like armor and shit, like
but no one is shooting at anyone. EU is getting involved and is trying to figure out, negotiate a position, basically compromise between the government and the protesters. Hey, Yanukovych will stay in power, etc., etc. You know what I mean? We'll keep big Russian bear happy and stuff like that. You know, everyone wins. Who comes in fucking picture? Victoria, fuck the EU, Nuland.
That was after that call happened already, after the government was in the process of being overthrown. And when I say in the process of being overthrown, I mean they were storming the Capitol. They were storming the presidential palace, and that phone call was specifically being handled because they were trying to understand what their agreed position was to represent the United States in the intersection between the EU and Russia. And they said, fuck the EU, because that was just the United States' position. That doesn't prove that it was a US-backed coup.
I said she popped up. I didn't say the call happened yet. She was there. And what she was doing was, publicly winning hearts and minds by literally fucking giving out bread. And then the shooting happened. And now why I'm specifically mentioning that is because there's a fucking CIA handbook on how to overthrow a government that was being distributed back in the day to Contras, where there are two things that you need to do. Win hearts and minds.
Yeah.
And make martyrs. Fire at your own guys.
Sure.
What happened?
That's a public book, though. That doesn't necessarily mean that the CIA is directly involved. It doesn't prove anything.
Sure, right.
So you have to look at what gains the United States did with how the stuff went down, and then you have to look at how those desperate groups that were fighting for the same cause, which are not all in agreement on how the same cause that all these groups, because it's a little bit in stuff that I've seen. So these groups all agreed, we want to be with the EU, we want to be closer to EU, the president has to go.
Right.
Other than that, how the government would be set up, what its politics would be, how much integration the rest of the ethnic Russians would be in, those people didn't agree on most of that stuff. Like majority of the stuff they didn't agree. And they didn't agree with how the U.S. wanted, and the U.S. didn't get everything. Nobody's going to get everything they wanted, but the U.S. got less of what it wanted than if it was installing a puppet government and facilitating an actual coup. I'm done. You can go.
You are correct, but what happened as a result? The Nord Stream 2 was fucking cancelled.
And then it was re-brought online while the civil war was going on, and Russia actively supporting the civil war.
I'm saying that if you take, Nord Stream, and by the way, this is not me saying that US wants, Europe move away from Russia. And
it's the US. This is a known position. Everybody agrees with this. Russia agrees
with
the EU, the US agrees.
It is very open position. And if you look at, if I make the point, so, and by the way, I'm not trying to prove anything. Yeah, I will explain in a bit later.
Just to be clear, you have about 2 more minutes before I ask you guys what you think the solutions to the war are, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, okay. So if you take it all, you know what I mean? The people that the US is buddy specifically end up in fucking power. Those are neo-Nazis. As you said, enemy of my enemy. But they were very much enemy. Whose was their enemy? Then you have just said it. And that was Yanukovych's government. They wanted them overthrown. Isn't that the case? You know what I mean? And because that was the position of Svoboda Party. They wanted Yanukovych gone. You know what I mean?
I think the United States would have been perfect. I think the United States would have been perfectly fine with Yanukovych staying in as long as he, well, not as long as, that's a poor way to say it, would have been perfectly fine with staying in had the EU been able to maneuver that position to where everybody won. I think that would have been the United States' fine, because specifically, this is when Obama was in office. This was during the Great Reset. This was during Clinton's Great Reset with Russia. This was Obama placating Russia. This was Obama saying, "Hey, hey, Mitt Romney, the '80s wants its foreign policy back," and then everybody's like, "Steel clap," when it turned out to be bullshit. But anyways,
right. But okay, so you have the people that US was buddy end up with power. The people who US was buddy end up armed and surrounding the parliament that votes. Right? Would you disagree with that? It doesn't prove anything, but my point in this entire, and what I have kind of hinted at before, is the US position, the official West's position is that Ukraine was done the Maidan was done by Ukrainian people without the influence of the West. I say, okay.
Was it without influence of the West, or is that the official position? I don't want to.
Okay, that they have not been assholes. It was all democracy, freedom, etc. Right?
Well, no. I think the way to go about this would be saying is, did the United States have an interest within Ukraine? Yes. Did the United States work for that interest? Yes. That does not mean that the United States funded, backed, and do a coup.
Now, I said that what they say about Euromaidan is that it was completely Ukrainian revolution, that they have not been doing anything fucking shady, you know what I mean, to do that coup. To which I would say that, okay, let us fucking verify it. If you say you have not been involved, we, all the people, should demand that there is everything declassified when it comes to fucking Ukraine 2000.
Yeah, I don't think that's tenable. I agree that it should become maybe declassified eventually. I don't know if that's a tenable position to hold right now at this juncture.
Yeah, but why not? Because we have not been.
You said said everything, because everything would include things that. Yeah. Okay, so what? So would a summary suffice without giving methods, active things like that, without names?
Would be questionable. Yeah, look, that those are details. Yeah, but basically that is my position, that we should verify, that we should all demand. Because I will ask you this: is it plausible? Not if it's proves, but as I laid everything, that there was US-sponsored coup in Ukraine in 2014. Is it plausible?
Plausible is too loose of a word. I would say there's probably a 20% chance of you being correct, and in my opinion. So there's a possibility, not a very high possibility.
So it is a Russian roulette, basically. We are playing Russian roulette here. That is the likelihood of that. 20%.
I mean, that's always going to be the case, isn't it? And we can't know for certain. And
right, and we should fucking verify. Because I'm sorry, if it was the case that US was...
I think even if the United... Sorry, finish.
If it's the case that US was specifically sponsoring neo-Nazis in order to shoot up protesters and police in Ukraine in order to have a coup, that is fucking evil, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's going to be evil, but right now we don't have any, in my opinion, we don't even have enough evidence right now to question if that was what the case was. When I mean my question, I mean, like, yeah, like that's really fucked up, and we need to like super investigate it, because it's more than likely not that the United States was directly involved with this. I don't think there's enough evidence.
And if I may, one last thing.
I'm not saying that's your position, to be clear. I want the audience to understand that. I'm not saying that is your position.
And Ukraine, after the Maidan happened, the Ukraine government did two things. They said a general amnesty to anyone in clashes with police, which, okay, fine, that is reasonable.
Yeah.
But they have destroyed all the files in regards to the police that got shot.
Who destroyed all those files?
Ukrainian government.
Okay, yeah, that's fucked up. I don't agree with that.
So it almost sounds like I need to get you guys on here just to talk about this.
Well, I would need to do a bit more research on this because there are some things he's mentioned that I have not heard before. Everybody, there's just too much information out there to get everything. It's not saying one way or the other.
Yeah, guys, I'm not paying attention to the chat at all, and Cypher, you too. If you want, if you have questions for sources or anything, I would ask that you either ask now here in chat or hit me up on Twitter or something like that. I'll be more than happy to give the sources to you.
Yeah, V Radio, if you can drop both of our Twitters into the chat for the audience.
I can, I can totally do that. I have your YouTube channels in there. Okay, so we're now down to the last bit here. I want to be sure you guys both have kind of an opportunity to talk about this, and I want to thank you both for coming on for sure. The conversation was very popular with people, and I hope that people recognize and take a moment to understand that okay, maybe there's an audience out there for watching two people call each other names and act like sixth graders or something, cyberbullying each other on the internet. But I think that we got a lot more done, and that's what dialectic is that these two people are actually trying to learn about the situation. They're not allowing themselves just to be emotionally attached to their position, which is the reason why I respect both of them, which is why they're on my stream. So please feel free to check out their channels. Again, I can't promise that you will agree with everything they say or that anything that they say is similar to what I say. But if you've been listening to V Radio long enough, then you know that that's not even my objective. My objective is to get people to think. So the question that the $10 super chat was about was, gentlemen, what do you think is the best possible solution to this war? How do we get out of this mess? I'm going to start with Cypher.
That's hard. Best possible solution? Well, to me, the best possible solution is Russia getting the fuck out. They don't have any moral justification for being involved at all, which is why I'm laughing, because I know that's not where they're going with it. To answer the question probably a little bit clearer, there will be a negotiated settlement at some point. Right now, there is no incentive for Russia to be in that negotiated settlement right now, nor is there a reason for Ukraine to be in that negotiated settlement. Why? Specifically because Russia is currently losing, not gaining territory, and is in a weaker position, so they don't have a reason to come to the table. Ukraine, because it is winning and is taking back territory and actually, doing fairly well in Western Ukraine, where the war is not being done, don't have a reason to go to the negotiating table either. And that would be the case even without the continued U.S. support, simply because Russia has depleted much of its munitions, unless China got involved with sending them munitions and tanks and the like as well, in which case then that would justify the United States continuing its support in as long as China continued its support. Even though I believe that the United States is morally justified in continuing its support for Ukraine, since Ukraine is the victim of an aggressor. I follow just war theory on this, and that is why I think that way. Now they just took Scrappy, you're going to have to look at a lot more of what's going on the ground to understand the strategic implications of what you're talking about. Right now, it seems like the Wagner group is being surrounded. They're losing territory on the ends, but gaining it in the middle, because what it appears to be is that Ukraine is surrounding that middle area that they have in Bakhmut, and they are going to push in and take the rest of them. They're trying to cut off the Wagner group from the rest of the Russian forces, and it has looked like it is succeeding. So you can't just look at what territory is being gained and lost on a case-by-case basis. You have to look at the overall movement of troops and the supply chains and everything else like that. And right now, it's not going in Russia's favor. Partly because of infighting with Russia, specifically the Russian general forces and the Wagner group. To answer the actual question, though, sorry, I know I'm being long-winded here, and I'll try to wrap it up. I think eventually what will happen is that we might see a slight federation of Ukraine. but that's not what Russia wants. If we can convince Russia to take that deal, I think that's probably what will end up happening. And Ukraine will be territorially whole, not being in NATO, and Russia won't be able to have access to Eastern Ukraine's vast natural gas resources. So that is what I think is going to end up being the best solution. And to continue to get that best solution, Ukraine has to continue to make grains. So that's where I'm at.
So real quick, folks, because people have pointed out that a lot of people are listening and maybe we're not aware of this, I'm running a non-scientific poll. And when viewing this poll, be, of course, aware of the fact that, my audience is more familiar with Paul than they are with Cypher. But my Discord is certainly familiar with Cypher. But there is a poll, who do you feel is more correct about Ukraine, currently going on my YouTube channel. And with that said, Paul, what do you see as far as the end to the war, if there could be one? You're muted, Paul.
I do apologize for that.
Okay.
Would you, my solution or how it will end up? Because those are two different things.
I guess it's a question. Do you think there is a solution? I mean, you can comment on both. I
answered both.
Oh, okay. So my solution, which historically there is precedence for it working from my country specifically, but it will be very unpopular in the West. But I would rather that people would focus on the pragmatism and view it as you are saving lives ultimately, and that is the utmost priority if that is the case. What this war have demonstrated is that Russia, minus their nuclear capabilities, and that is big question mark if they have even proper nuclear capabilities, Europe has nothing to be afraid of from Russia. They've got their asses handed to them decisively on the battlefield many times, and are arguably the second best army in Ukraine as of now. So I would propose a compromise if it would be all to me, and I would be the supreme authority or supreme advisor or whatever. It would be that Ukraine will retain all its territory minus Crimea, but all the territorial waters and all the rich resources would stay with Ukraine. But because I have not yet seen a war where there have not been reprisals by the victors against the perceived perpetrators. And I can almost guarantee you that there would be quite a few massacres in eastern Ukraine if Ukraine is to win. That is a historical record. And there is one exception that worked for an established and clear peace, because that would be just sowing seeds for civil war, insurgencies, and stuff like that. And that is to remove the ethnic population en masse to Russia by making basically decision. You either stay here and pronounce you being Ukrainian, or you move away in a certain period of time, because that would be like also placating the nationalists in Ukraine, because they are still very powerful, and they actually want to get rid of Russians in Ukraine. So that would be basically one way how to make them shut up about losing Crimea. Now, Russia would not go for this unless one condition, and that is if all of EU would leave NATO and found their own military organization without the United States of America. Those are things that would stop this war and obviously continue export of natural resources to EU, etc., etc. Those are things that would stop this war with basically immediately. But I'm not saying they are moral. I'm not so sure that they are politically attainable. But they would meet everyone's core demands and not cross anyone's red lines. Now, how it will end up? Well, Russia is continuing to get their asses handed on the battlefield, but basically they have more blood to spare. Ukraine has more hardware to spare. It is now a question who will run out of what first.
So that's kind of like what I think, from what I can see, is that the only thing I see happening, whether it's ideal or not, is that it's going to come down to who runs out of money first, just like you see in Vietnam. And it's like a question of like which country finally decides, okay, I've had enough of this. And unfortunately, the end game of that, I don't know the end answer to that part. Yeah,
Russia is probably banking on American presidential elections.
Russia is banking on. I agree. Logical and I don't really disagree on what the most likely solution is going to be. There's already talks in Europe about forming its own military alliance without having to rely so much on the U.S. I don't know if Russia would agree that that actually placates their fear of NATO or what have you. Even if NATO dissolved because this thing comes up, I don't know if that necessarily would placate them. But yeah.
If I may, as a European, I would prefer this option, even to basically build up our own strength and break ties, in this manner with United States, not to become rivals or anything like that. Just to basically be like, yeah, okay, we go our own ways, when it comes to military and alliances and stuff like that. And it is from historical precedents, because my people specifically have been abandoned by our allies in World War II. And as a result, we have ended up, like subjugated by Nazi Germany. And I don't trust others that they would come to our to save us in time of need. And there is also plenty of to say, because I have a problem with NATO on moral basis, as their actions in Libya, because that was beyond fucked up what they did that, and I don't want that blood on my hands.
So
yeah,
go ahead. Finish. No, you finish, and I'll.
No, this is not pertinent to the rest of the conversation. I don't want to get into another debate, so it's fine.
Oh no, it sounds like though I do like listening to the two of you debate with each other, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed this as much as it seems the audience has, and I hope that people start to get more of a taste for this kind of actual wholesome, real exchange of views and debate. I think both of you guys did a very good job, and again, my poll is obviously going to be skewed in some ways. If you have not voted in the poll, there's only 15 votes currently cast and 24 people watching. So please take your opportunity to vote on the poll before I close it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I am planning on having a Sunday show on a regular basis with a friend of mine named Hoot, who is a right-leaning libertarian, and I'm a left-leaning libertarian. We'll be discussing current events, and issues as they pop up. I'm going to be doing that probably every Sunday. We need to be flexible about it because I'm a sports coach and I'll have events on certain days, and he's a family man too. So, please make sure you tune into that. If you guys would like me to moderate other debates, please give me an opportunity to do so. This was much easier than I think it would have been on many of the Twitch panels that Cypher and I have been on together. But the primary point is just that if we're talking over top of each other, or if we're comparing our ability to insult and zinger each other, the actual information that's trying to be presented is not getting to the audience. And unfortunately, that's really what that's about. If I'm trying to make fun of you as a person, it's because I don't really want the audience to be thinking about the things you're saying. That doesn't mean you're right. It just means you're good at distracting from the point. And that's what it is that I'm trying to get out of. So anyway, both of you guys do an outro, and then I will close my poll. Go ahead, Cypher.
I was going to let Logic go since I went first for the intro.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Very much. Cypher, first of all, thank you for meeting me. It was a rather spiritual and quite fun debate or discussion. We, to a big portion, we disagree on things, but I have a feeling that it is rather we would have to have a sit down over a beer over many hours and talk this out, and
if
we would,
if only we could have political conversations like that again. Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think eventually we would settle, like that we each have valid points, and we should verify. We should not trust. We should verify from our governments because they've done fucked up shit before. And we thank you very much. No, sorry, I don't want to also point that I'm putting a zinger. I'm sorry. It was maybe unfounded, so Cypher, thanks a lot, that was definitely fun. And yeah, to audience, I apologize if my performance is not the best. Not the best
thought
at
you did okay.
live things and
I,
etc.
I think even your opponent told you did very good. So I think you're fine. Don't get insecure on me, buddy.
I'm not insecure now.
See, Cypher even had to adjust his hair. Like he had to adjust his hair. That's how
I
good of a
appreciate
job you did.
Yeah.
It's like I
And
could see the anime wind blowing his hair.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, so Cypher, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks V-Radio for being a moderator and jumping in when needed. I greatly appreciate that. I can be long-winded, so thanks again on that one. For everybody that's watching, Logical did very well. This was a good discussion. Take everything we both say with a grain of salt, trust but verify. We're not operating in bad faith here, but do your own research. And by that, I mean actual research. Don't go look up a YouTube video by some rando and take what they say because you trust them. Go look at source materials if you can. So you can find me again at Crowdsourced Politics, both on YouTube and Twitch. You can find me at Crowdsourced Poll on Twitter. And if you do Mastodon, at CSP Cypher at Federated Press. I do these. I want to do these more often. I'm going to be redoing some shows. I'm going to be doing actual essay content. If you watch any of my excerpts from my newscast, you can see it's a bit more essay than news live cast. But yeah, that's where you can catch us. And this was great. I want to do these more. So V-Radio, if you find somebody else, go for it.
Yeah, by all means. And like I said, I think that people should get smarter when they listen to something, not more stupid. And I think that's one of the reasons why I said for over the years is the reason why, for example, so many of my viewers don't even really know or don't have a good handle on my personal politics is that I'm so sick of like people getting so tribal to the point where the facts can actually be obscured because you don't want your tribe to lose, right? Like, it was actually Paul who made an excellent point once, like, how can you guys, even in the United States, have any hope of having like real conversations about substantive issues like Medicare for all or whatever, if you can't even agree that Kyle Rittenhouse didn't shoot black people? Like it's stuff like, we have to be able to have like a basic grasp of the facts before we can move into all of that. And that's why I say, my content is of value to both the right and the left. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this debate. And by all means, if there's anybody else you'd like to see throw down, I'm very even-handed, but I'm also very firm. It wasn't necessary here. This is like babysitting two kids who are very good, well-behaved. That's meant to be a compliment. As opposed to like, literally I was ready. Like I got a timer. I'll put it up publicly. This guy's talking for 2 minutes. You're stopping now. If you're not stopping, I'm muting you. I'm willing to do that if necessary. I'm just hoping that it won't be most of the time. So thank you guys very much for tuning in today. And please make sure, like as I said, we put the Twitter up and I'll make sure I throw that in the descriptions because these guys have both said that you can reach out to them on Twitter. And I also have their channels already in the description for at least for the YouTube side of things. I will also try to throw Cypher's Twitch on. Are you more active on Twitch than you are on YouTube?
I live stream to both, but I am probably going to end up taking off the live streams on YouTube. I don't know. I haven't decided fully yet. That it's hard for me to maintain my audience. It's very sporadic on both.
Yeah, I know how that is for sure.
On Twitch. So.
All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in, everybody. And as I said, I have actually another upcoming stream with Lierre Keith. She's a feminist activist from kind of the previous generation. She and I are going to be continuing our conversation about what happened to feminism and upcoming stuff. I'm still talking to David Thibodeau, who is a survivor from the Waco incident, about coming on at some point. If there is any topic you want me to cover, please feel free to ask. I will look into it. I can't promise I can always get high-profile guests, but I usually have pretty good luck with that. And thanks again for tuning in, everybody. I'm going to end the live. You guys can stick around for just a second to say goodbye to each other off stream, and I will talk